Good afternoon, and welcome to Reducing Costs and Improving Service by Implementing Use Case Specific Automation Health System CIO Production, sponsored by Resourcing HQ. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name's Anthony Guerra. I'm the founder and editor in chief of Health System CIO, and I will be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You could send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll take them later in the program. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, we're going to go about 35, 40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Dr. Ash Goel, SVP and CIO at Bronson Healthcare, K. Marhefka, Deputy CIO at RWJBarnabas Health, and Ross Stoddard, Chief Strategy Officer with Simetria Health. And then we will have our Q&A. So let's jump right in. Lots of good stuff to discuss. Very interesting topic today. Ash, let's start with you. Can you give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. And Bronson Healthcare is a fairly large healthcare organization in the southwest of Michigan. It's a community-based academic health center with 5 acute care facilities, a medical school, and many ambulatory services throughout the 12-county area. I am the Chief Information Officer for the enterprise and have purview over the entirety of the digital technologies, cybersecurity, applications, infrastructure, analytics, and all other related technology portfolios. I've been here about 8 years now. I was pausing there for a second to figure out how long I have been here. Sometimes time just flies by when you're having fun. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent, Ash. Thank you so much. Kay?
Good afternoon, everyone. And like Ash, it's my pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon. My role is the Deputy Chief Information Officer for RWJBarnabas Health, which is the largest health system in the state of New Jersey. We have we have 12 hospitals. We have over 400 practices in the ambulatory space. We have a very large IT division. We're about 1,000 strong. We see about 3 million patients a year, and we are the clinical partner for Rutgers University and 3 medical schools within Rutgers. And my jurisdiction, from an IT perspective, as a deputy CIO, there are 2 of us. We report to the corporate CIO. I am over all of the ambulatory space. And with that, I have all of digital health under my jurisdiction as well, as it relates to patient engagement, access, and again, with a big focus on the ambulatory space.
Excellent, Kay. Thank you. Ross?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Excited to be here with everyone. Ross Stoddard, Chief Strategy Officer at Simetria Health. At Simetria Health, we serve our clients with technology and workflow optimization. And we engage with clients anywhere from single one-time assessments all the way through full revenue cycle outsourcing. So our focus is that optimization, maximization of reimbursement for the care that our clients provide to their patients. So happy to be here, Anthony.
All right, excellent. Very good. Let's get into it. Ash, we're going to start with you. How are potential points of automation typically identified for each of the below? How do ideas get vetted, prioritized, and selected? Talk about the differences involved in the different paths. Discuss how governance comes into play. And this is sort of a construct I had in mind, which was sometimes IT is going to be the one presenting ideas, suggestions in ways technology can solve an operational problem that IT has become aware of. So I know you're challenged with this. How about this solution that we're aware of? Or user surfaced. It could be a suggestion or request from the users saying, hey, IT, how about this tool that I learned about at a conference I was at? Ash, take me through that and tell me how is that a generally sort of a two different ways that ideas come about, and just address the question on the screen. Thank you, Ash.
Yeah, thank you. And I would be certainly making stuff up if I said that this isn't as well planned out or less chaotic than what it would appear when I make the comments of how we have tried to optimize a structure around this.
Mhm.
So with that, and also just a quick comment, there was a helicopter from one of the trauma probably calls coming in. So if you hear a lot of background noise, my apologies to everybody. It was very loud here a second ago. I was hoping you will keep going on with your question so that the thing flies away. But if you're asking about how we span the control of many, many aspects of automation that are identified, we have a customer facing and we have an internal process. Those are separated, as you pointed out. And in the customer or user facing governance strategies, we have identified subsets of portfolios that have a process in place. And that's based off of our solutions delivery. We segregate those out into clinical solutions, corporate solutions, process optimization, and digital solutions. And each one of those areas works on either managing through or surfacing up what requests or ideas are generated throughout the organization. We meet every quarter to look at the overall list of things that have been brought in. And within the technology teams, we have business relations experts. We call them intake specialists that work with individual requestors to identify and help them gather more information in what areas they are investigating or interested in. And that is then curated into a single source for having these groups understand or decide on which ones are the highest priority to go about. And that's then escalated up through the governance in a way that allows for us to bounce against the different sets of solutions and portfolios that we manage, because we have capacity and resource constraints. And certainly, we also need to recognize what value these ideas generate. That's how we look at external user requested services. Internally, within IT, we have a similar process, but it is more agile because we use a run, grow, or transform type of business model internally, which looks at monthly where processes are either going to need to be improved upon or we have growth that we anticipate. And we bake that into our monthly planning cycles and walk through the usual process of identification and prioritization. My planning cycle is quarterly for execution because our project teams work on a quarterly resource allocation. So that's how I try to manage through this. Now that's the perfect picture. And I'm sure all of you are very familiar with managing technology demands. We never meet all of those demands. We never are able to serve them up in the order of priority that we identify, because as soon as the paint is even put on the collage, the color changes or the priority changes or the request change. So it becomes a little bit chaotic and we manage through it. And we also look to adjust to the business needs and tying it back to business strategy for the organization. That's where my role comes in trying to navigate through some of those to highlight areas which are important to the organization, which are not, where we think that we need to adjust the overall individual portfolio ask. I'll stop and see if there's any questions that come at me from this, from either you or the other panelists.
Yeah, well, I'm going to hear from everybody. I definitely have taken quite a bit of notes, and we'll follow up on some of the things you mentioned. But Kay, let me know your thoughts here.
So I'll start with just sort of a general platform from where we make a lot of our decisions and have a lot of our debates about what we do with technology. And first of all, RWJBarnabas, as I said, 12 hospitals, lots of medical groups. That's because of a lot of merges, a lot of acquisitions, and along with that comes 12 different ways of doing things. And so we're very well-functioning, very robust health system. But we are still working through the nuances of those differences. And the largest one being, how do we make sure that we're funneling all of the technology asks, requests, questions about something new? How do we funnel that into a central place so that it can be discussed in a very structured format? It took us a long time to get there. But we feel like we've gotten there now. And what that looks like is essentially, we make it very simple. We've established 3 major councils that are, for the most part, guided by IT, but there's just as many of our operational partners in these councils as there are IT executives. But we start with something called a strategic council, which is basically, does the request go along with the strategic goals of the organization? As Ash said, that is very, very important. The second thing is that, does it fit technically within our structure? It doesn't make any sense for us to go back to a best of breed for everything type existence. Best of suite is great, and we're very integrated and all that good stuff, but there's still a chance of having best of breed go run amok. So we make sure that from a steering committee aspect, that whatever it is that's being asked for fits technically into our structure. And then finally, who's going to pay for it? Is the capital already been determined? Does that need to be, debated via tennis match versus IT versus another division? If we can't pay for it, we can't have it. And so that has to be determined as well. So we've been able to funnel requests like that into that structure, and that is working very, very well. That's mostly obviously to catch the user surfaced asks. And then there's always the K element to that was, is technology really needed to fix what you're saying is broken? And I'm a real proponent of making sure that we don't automate our dysfunction, which is something that I think we all do. We're kind of blind to the fact that that's actually what we're doing because we're trying to meet the needs of our customers. But we always have to put that question out there. Are we actually solving the problem, or are we just throwing technology at it because technology makes it easier to admire the problem? I guess there's another good one. So there's that, and that's where we can be responsive to our user base. But at the same time, there are things that occur to us that we know will be helpful and that we know will work technically. And that's where Anthony has heard me use this phrase often. That's where myself and my IT executive peers become the pitchers instead of just the catchers of the requests and the ideas. And I love being our executive operations whisperer in terms of what's needed from a technological standpoint to solve a problem. So there you go, a couple of different ways to think about things. And but that structure that I mentioned at the beginning is strong and very successful.
And I'll follow up with you in a little bit, but it would be interesting to hear a little bit about the evolution of that. You finally got to a good place. You probably didn't start there, and there were probably a lot of fits and starts, maybe councils that were put together that had to be dissolved, and so this isn't really working. Maybe you had 4 councils, now you have 3. Maybe you had 2, now you have 3. That kind of a thing. So we'll go back to that, Kay. But I want to hear from Ross and get his thoughts on the question on the screen.
Yeah, sure. So much like Ash mentioned, we think about it in those 2 buckets of internal versus external automation. So just by nature of our work, we work with our clients to automate or streamline their processes and technologies on their sites. So, obviously that from our perspective, that would be external automation or external process improvement. So is that driven mostly by a user or by our group? I would say we typically come in and we drive a lot of those recommendations and automation opportunities. Occasionally we do get user requested, again, still talking about those external users. Occasionally we do get user requested automation opportunities. And much like Kay talked about, then it goes to, okay, well, how feasible is that automation opportunity? Who's going to pay for it? Where are the dollars coming from? And then we really think about what's the long-term maintenance challenge or opportunity for whatever it is that you're automating. And what do I mean by that? Does it require a new technology, a new platform, a bolt-on? Do you have people that are trained on that platform, or are you going to have to go, train additional FTEs to maintain that system? What happens when one of the systems it connects to changes or breaks? What's the uplift to keep that system maintained and plugged in? The other thing we look at a lot is, what if the automation doesn't work as expected, right? So what's your unwinding process to actually back that out of the system or the process or the enterprise that it's impacting? Switching to the internal automation opportunities, it's really a mixture. We have a culture of continuous improvement. It's one of our core values. So we talk about it, frankly, on a weekly basis about automation opportunities and streamlining opportunities. We do not have formal committees set up. We're agile in terms of, we will bring up, typically we have a weekly call that's a formal part of the agenda, and we identify those opportunities and pretty quickly vet them out by engaging the team members that are responsible for wherever that automation will impact in terms of our internal processes or how we support our clients. So just landing there, we have the internal and the external, and I would say it's probably 50-50 in terms of user opportunity versus IT, as you structured it in this question, IT or external technical recommendation.
All right, very good, Ross. Thank you for that. All right, Kay, we're going to start with you on this. And this is we sort of talked in general about, could be anything, how ideas and good ideas and requests are surfaced and solutions are suggested, whether that's coming from IT or from the users. So we went through that. Now I think we'll focus a little bit on specific idea of automation, because not all those ideas have to do exactly with automation per se. But not every business process lends itself to automation. Kay was saying, in general, we don't want to throw technology at a bad process. This is a little more specific, this question. How can these be avoided? In our personal lives, I think we've all been experienced to a company's attempts at automation that we find unpleasant. In fact, that may be more the rule than the exception, at least in my experience. So many times I just want to talk to a person. But the phone tree, you listen closely because your options have changed. You put your head down and say, "Dear God, help me through this." So that, listen, where does automation not fit? Where is not going to be helpful? And how can you make sure that what you've put in is being received positively? And how can possibly IT work with marketing if that is a key relationship in rolling some of this stuff out? Or maybe I have the wrong idea on that. But anyway, Kay, let's start with you on that.
So, automation is in our organization has fits very, very well in certain aspects of our business, supply chain, and through the contracting process, through with HR, with training. There's just different aspects of the business through, especially with ERP systems, where it just makes a lot of sense, and it's common actually. And so that success, that excitement that our my partners in the business and our constituents are seeing, that can't help but bleed itself into the excitement. Well, how can we use that in the clinical space? How can we automate some things there? And I just attended a recent conference where I was a Chime panelist, where this topic came up, and there is. And I brought this back to my colleagues here at RWJBarnabas, which is, how do you think that through? And there is a hardcore, pretty good use cases for automation, as I said, on the ERP side, the business side, supply chain, all of that. There is maybe not as good, but opportunities where we have what I call the patient gray space, which is non-clinical, but it's certainly administrative. And then there's the hardcore clinical space where automation is there. You should fear it. I mean, there's some that works very well, but fear it, because we're not quite there yet from an AI perspective, except for some very specific areas like ambient, the ambient language technology that's happening and other things. But so that middle space, that patient administration, that's where we're focusing and being very careful with how we automate things. And Anthony, call centers, the phone tree, that fits right into that space, because it's all about patient engagement. And for us, it's solving our access problem. We're enhancing access by providing more self-service for our patients. So that's where there is so much focus in our organization for automating as much as possible, providing patients with tools automated tools that help them get things done faster. But it's not from a clinical perspective, it's from the patient business perspective. So once you have a focus on an area that you can really dive in and look at your tools, look at goals of the organization that we're trying to conquer, that we're trying to meet, then that made it not easy, but it helped us to focus on that area of our business where automation made sense. And so we're doing all kinds of things in that space, and ironically, call center is probably number 2 of a list of about 7. And yes, nobody wants a phone tree, so.
It's great. I'm sorry. I'm just cynical. I'm sitting there with a phone tree. I'm hitting 0 as many times as I can. And so the really mean ones go, you haven't made a selection. We're going to disconnect you.
Yeah.
Nice ones say, all right, I could tell this guy hit 0 17 times. He's mad. We'll give him a human being. Anyway, that's a topic. Well, maybe it is a topic for today. Anyway, let's go. Kay, I love the concept of gray areas. So I think,
Yes.
that's really interesting. Let's go over to Ash. Ash, let me know what are your thoughts?
Not only was I smiling at what Kay had to say, but also picturing you pushing zeros.
Oh,
I know I have done it a few times for
please.
the thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'll build on what Kay was saying around this whole thing about being very cautious and in some areas fearing what automation does, because no good deed goes unpunished. Right? You can't really push or you can't try to foster technology when the area or the business processes are not yet ready to take on the challenge, or more importantly, let's not become a solution looking for a problem. So we have about 85 contact centers, and each one of them, yes, I know, right?
Do you see my eyebrows?
I did. And each one of them have their own unique version of the phone trees and whatever else is. The technology works great, but to the patients, you can imagine if they get caught in one, they get caught in one flavor of the nightmare that they have to get caught in. And there, what we are approaching this from is what is the solution to a problem? In this case, the problem is could or should the patients get the same experience no matter where they're at? And do we have the right processes to allow for, even if it is distributed call centers, to have the same set of information available to them so that they can either hand off or make the right decisions for patients? And our approach in that area has always been, well, I'm going to talk to and lead with the business leaders, the COOs of different verticals to say, are you seeing that as a problem? And if it is so, is it worth our time investing in identification of process redesign before we put a new technology in front of them? And I think of that as an opportunity, and which is where I think our roles shift from being the technology whisperer to being process redesign engineers in creating an opportunity, creating possibilities for business operators to see what can be done without throwing 20 more people at it and solving for really a different idea. Most of the people are amenable to that because, you know, in healthcare, people are the most expensive resource and the most difficult to keep around because we keep making them do more and more with less and less. So that's the approach we are taking for that. It hasn't yet been successful. It's on my plan for later this year to get it to a point where 2025, I will go from 85 to half the number, hopefully.
Yeah, it's great stuff, Russ. And I want you to, if you would expand on this idea of, and Kay and Ash both touched on it. We don't want to throw, first of all, we don't want to keep buying technology we don't need. We don't want to buy technology that doesn't fit with our IT stack. We don't want to be out of control, best of breed. Everyone wants to move towards application rationalization as opposed to going in the other direction. So there is and should be a higher bar on buying, especially one-off solutions, than there used to be. That bar should be very high because we want that systemness, we want that integration, we want data flowing around, we want lower cost of ownership and all the things you mentioned. So this idea that Ash also mentioned about moving from technology whisperer to redesign engineers. So let's look at the process first before I just throw a piece of technology on top of it. Can I help you redesign that process? And that redesign may not have a technology solution. So I'm not sure if IT is offering to essentially just redesign the process or encourage the user or the operational department to say, hey, have you looked at your process first? I understand you're interested in a tool, but have you looked at it first? Or could IT even be in a position to help provide that service and say, hey, we're going to help you look at your processes, and then we'll be able to do an analysis and see if a tool fits. What are your thoughts, Russ?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's extremely important. And just by virtue of the work we do with our clients, I mean, that's step one, is to understand the process, because typically the request comes from some pain point, right? So a provider can't do X, Y, or Z, or it takes them too many clicks to do X, Y, or Z, or they have to hire another FTE to finish all of the clicks in the system, those type of discussions. A lot of times we are actually able to optimize the use of whatever their core system is, avoiding any additional bolt-on or any additional purchase that will result in the lack of integration or the lack of systemness, as you mentioned. So really that's step one. Okay, well, what is the actual problem? Are you utilizing all of the functionality that is available in your core system? And then if it's yes to both of those questions, then we can start looking at potential add-ons or platforms. I think part of the challenge, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, we've observed two challenges. One, a lot of the vendors that are proposing to be bolt-ons to assist with automation are not healthcare educated. They don't know healthcare. So you start these conversations and they approach it as though, yes, we've got this toolkit. With this toolkit, you can do all of these things. And if you ask very specific use case, essentially their answer is, yeah, probably it'll do that, right? So, it just doesn't fill, or some of the interactions we've had do not fill us with a lot of confidence that a lot of vendors in this space truly understand healthcare yet. That's one component. The second component is the financial justification for how many vendors are pricing their platforms. So, we all have to deal with multiple systems and the rationalization process. It feels as though many of these automation platforms that are approaching the market don't understand the margins in healthcare, and they price themselves as though they are the core system, right? So, and maybe as a proportion of your revenue, it does not seem like a lot, but what they don't seem to understand is they are one component in that technology stack. So we've really been challenged with working with our clients in terms of the financial justification. It's like, yeah, we can go automate this, but A, what is it actually going to save? What pain point is it going to remove? And B, can we just hire someone for half the cost of whatever that platform is and have a better experience? And oh, by the way, that person can do other things with their time as well. So, it's I think a constant balancing act and a constant challenge that we have to be mindful about, and just say, well, really, is this going to achieve what we want it to achieve? And then I'll land on actually kind of going back to the beginning of that, which is we try to be very thoughtful about what the expected outcome is and be very explicit about that outcome. So what is it we're going to save? What is it we're going to fix? Whether it's money, time, errors, patient experience, etc. Just be very explicit about what the mission statement is for that opportunity.
All right, very good. Let's talk a little bit about implementation around some of this fun stuff. Kay, let's start with you. Talk about how automation is implemented. Discuss best practices in change management that cover both the technological and human/political aspects. When successful automation will result in a job I don't know how often that happens, but I would imagine a lot of times someone's going to have to do something slightly differently than they used to, or maybe they get a chance to do something else. Sometimes people don't like that because you're taking away. Anytime anybody's asked to change in any capacity, you're going to get pushback, even if it's just an initial panic. And oh, that's what you mean, right? Initial panic is, but that's got to be dealt with properly, right? If you want to have, if you want to have change embraced, there's a way to do these things. There's a way to engage folks to get it to work. So, Kay, your thoughts?
Yep. So I'll put that last statement to rest from our organization. From my vantage point and with my very close associations with my operational partners, I don't believe there's a single employee in our organization who feels like they're going to be replaced with automation. And I think that comes from they are so busy. Every single individual in our organization is so busy that everyone welcomes the opportunity to have their work stream their responsibilities enhanced by automations. And that's how, we don't even have to sell it that way. It's just a natural, oh, this is going to make my job so much easier, reaction to when automation is introduced. So that is not a problem at our organization. That fear has yet, I'll say, yet. How do we implement it? So obviously we've made the decision to go ahead with something. We figured out who's going to pay for it. We've already figured out that it has meaning, it meets a goal, and that it fits in with our technological stack, as you put it, our IT stack. So what do we do from there? Most likely, depending on the type of technology that we're implementing, most likely we're going to do a pilot. Hands down, 100%, we're going to do a pilot. And because our organization is so big that we very rarely do anything in a big bang situation. And but a pilot is almost 100% the way that we go. And before that pilot happens, the technology goes through a very intensive security assessment and a fit review. And that is after the councils have pretty much deemed that from an IT perspective, it's going to fit. This is a much more detailed assessment. So those things have to happen. And then we choose the pilot. We work with our operational partners. Actually, they choose the pilot. And then we implement it. We watch it carefully. We test it, obviously. And then we always have a form of at-the-elbow support for almost everything that we do. So, and then finally, nothing works without transparency and communication to the entire organization about what we're trying, what we're piloting. And it's not what we as in IT, it's what the organization is piloting. And I'll finish up by saying that communication is so important to our organization that we have a defined tech. It's almost, I hate using the term technology, but I will. It's our arm of our marketing / communication tower that is specifically communicating in English at a high school level of how it's translated about our technological advancements and what's coming and what we're testing. So that comes out at least once, if not twice a week, to the entire organization, so everybody knows what's happening. That creates a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out if I'm not the pilot. But we look at that as being a good thing because it's just generating enthusiasm.
Very good. Excellent. Ash?
I was gonna say I'm gonna go work for Kay here.
Yeah, sounds good, right?
Sounds good. It's a
I'm
lot of
in.
work.
It does. You know, I'll be honest, I think we struggle with technology's role in the organization when we're looking at this implementation and best practices. Now we have a view of what our role could be or should be. But at least from where I sit, we end up taking on more direct oversight around planning, management, success, change management, process management, and measuring the outcomes for any deployment that we do than ideally we should. And again, that's a matter of opinion, right? We're also culturally an organization which, like Kay mentioning, growing really fast, has held steadfast to beliefs around what worked well in the past. And what worked well in the past required a lot of T's to be crossed and a lot of I's to be dotted, which means overanalysis and perfection is expected. And that belies the fail fast approach that we would love to take in some areas. And in fact, in the later part of this conversation, maybe we can touch about questions we want to ask each other, because by the time we get through these processes of getting approvals strategically for getting something done, the train's left the station. Now we are holding the bag to making it happen, and pardon the strong language, come hell or high water. And because we have created a very centralized approach to technology deployment, as the enterprise is all ultimately coming through me from a technology perspective, we have designed our systems to whether the technology gets done or not is ultimately accountability that lands in my plate. So we take on everything that we can and should, whether it is operational or it is financial or if it is human change management within operations. We are essentially hand holding the organization through that change.
Mm-hmm.
So that creates a lot of consternation on my teams because well, that's not what I signed up for. And you see, in my name, the title MD, that also then lends itself to a very easy leap for the rest of the organization. Well, you know everything, right? I mean, you are a clinician, and I am. I still practice medicine. I still go out and do things on the weekends. In fact, I'm starting my 3-day shift tomorrow, and it's both a good and a bad thing because it creates a different dynamic for us. So that's a challenge. I would love to say that we do this and we do this well. I think we don't know where to stop with our accountability and yet be responsible for the completion and delivery of projects.
That's a really interesting point, Ash. Thank you for that. Ross, your thoughts?
Sure, yeah. So I always take on the two different perspectives here. So one is our internal automation, optimization systems, et cetera. The second is what we're delivering to our clients. So the extra complication is that each of our clients has a different culture and change management process. So and we engage with that, basically on a one-on-one basis. So but looking at the internal components, it's really a cultural discussion. So we talk all the time about continuous improvement, technologies that we're investigating, that we're vetting. I love Kay's point about piloting. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I was brought to this discussion today. We were running a pilot right now with RWJBarnabas, the sponsor of this webinar, around some automation tasks in our team's workflow. So again, piloting is important, and I alluded to it also earlier in the call. We want to understand how to back that out of the process if it doesn't achieve the intended result. So that's another component. I would also echo what Kay said around everyone is so busy. It feels like we could automate 50% of our tasks and everyone would still have stuff to do, right? So there's also, when we look at it from an external perspective, meaning for our clients, there's always some resistance or concern when we actually are brought in to provide assessments of workflow or provide recommendations on technology optimization or workflow optimization, because these people sometimes have been doing the same thing for many years. And if we recommend something different, then the question always is, well, what am I going to do now? Right. So that ties back to my point on each organization has its own culture. And we try to help that leadership start the narrative of this is not intended as, getting rid of people. We're all very busy. There are all these things that we could be doing to improve patient experience or decrease pajama time, those kind of priorities. So we need everybody to be on the same page about this. It's really a top-down, constant communication about really what the goal of that automation is intended to be.
Excellent. Kay, quick follow-up on the pilot concept. Everyone does pilots. What is your goal for a pilot? I'm thinking that pilot is a test run, right? So we want to see if this works as expected from a technology, from an adoption point of view. We want to see if this works out. is it usually an optimization dry run? So we see, okay, this is where it needs to be improved. I mean, or does it occasionally say, okay, this didn't work out at all. So glad we piloted it. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It goes both ways, wins and losses. And we treasure the losses as much as we treasure
Yeah,
the
it's a near miss, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we learn so much from them, and we actually communicate those same in the same way we communicate the successes. And thank you, Ash, for your lovely compliment. You can come work for me anytime. I do the same for you. But I do have to credit, this goes to the wins and the losses and the culture that's been created within our IT division and to celebrate both. This comes from a place of my boss, our IT corporate CIO, Rob Adamson. He stresses three very important things. And one of them is, and he was our chief pharmacy officer for a long time here at RWJBarnabas, so he's a clinician as well, Ash. But he's basically, always work with the thought of kindness, be kind. Secondly, make sure our patients are safe. And thirdly, empathy with our operational our operational partners. So he has helped tremendously to change the tone of how IS responds and works with our customers. So I say that because that goes directly back to even a pilot and the communication around success, loss. Absolutely. The other thing I think that we take from pilot experience all the time is that that's where we intensely develop, if it is deemed a success, we developed our communication strategy around how we deploy it. We fine tune our training of that and what's required, what can be virtual versus in person and so forth and so on. But there's so many things that we say, okay, it works, everybody feels good, everything's great. Now let's, take the really, the hard stuff that needs to be really good going forward. And we work all that out, and then it becomes very iterative as we complete the implementation. It's how we did our our big EMR transition. It's exactly how we did that.
The other thing I want to talk about a little bit, and I think Ash touched on this, is speed. When I hear the processes for moving from requests being somehow evaluated in a systemic way so things don't get lost. So there's the surfacing, we've used the term surfacing of requests, to seeing if they work with the overall plan and if they jive with everything and if they can be paid for, to different committees and councils, to evaluations on different levels. And Ash, I think you said basically by the time we get anything like implemented, it's obsolete because they asked for it 2 years ago. And I'm putting that time frame on it. That may not be accurate. But I'd like to go quick around the horn and talk about this, because one of the things IT never wants to be is the black box where requests go to die. And justice delayed is justice denied, right? We think of all these concepts that so anyway, let's go with Ash, then we'll go around the horn real quick. We're almost out of time. But I think this is important, this idea of speed or some element of speed in all of this. So Ash, you first, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, that is very much fundamental to any processes that we try to put in place in order to get to them and communicate with the requester what the process looks like, and help them actually be part of that process in a way that they can advocate for it. And because they are part of that process, know where the request is at, it also becomes an education and a learning opportunity, because as you know, and as all of technologists know, the number of service providers or technology solution providers out there who are selling to organizations themselves with saying IT is not needed in this process.
Right.
It's always going to be fascinating to me. Right? So we bring them along and we try to put in place very clear directives to our teams to be partners with customers and making sure that they run that request up the chain and be part of the discussion right up to when it is essentially a yay or nay. And if it is a yay, then we have a timeline established to when that is expected to be, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a quarterly planning cycle. So it is not 2 years, but it's certainly not tomorrow either. And again, as Kay mentioned, right, the sizes of the organizations dictate the volume of requests, the amount of resources, and speed to value. And in some ways, I think the place where requests go to die is not a bad place to be at because, as I say, there's no idea in healthcare that's a bad idea because everybody is trying to get an idea which will improve a service, improve an outcome. It's about how we can spend the time, the money, the energy, and the resources in the best way. We are not built out of zero marginal cost service models like Google's and Meta's of the world are. We are built out of a very resource intensive service model. So anything that we do comes with a substantial amount of cost. That's how we look at it from a business strategy perspective, and there is tolerance to that approach.
Very good, Ross. When I was a kid and we wanted a toy, you ordered it from a catalog, and I think it came in about 2 months. Today, I ordered something on Amazon. I think it might be outside right now. So the expectations of, I want versus, I want compared to when I have, it's like this big. So how do you deal with users when they're not going to get it today?
Well, so I think it goes to communication on reasonable timelines, right? As Ash talked about, it's not going to be right now, but it's also not going to be 6 months from now. So our teams that typically engage directly with the end users, we're fortunate we have a very knowledgeable team, and we encourage every interaction with the end user to provide some sort of quick win. So maybe you can't solve their entire problem, or maybe you can't achieve exactly what they're requesting all in that first call resolution or that first engagement if you're on site, but do something to show immediate value and make sure you repeat back what the request is very clearly and get acknowledgement that that is indeed the request. So those are a couple of things. The third I would say is if we don't know how to achieve it or we don't know what the answer is, it's okay to say that and provide them a time when you will follow up with particularly providers. Providers are particularly anxious to get on with improvements and optimization for their day. Because obviously we talked about everyone being busy. Providers are no exception. They're extremely busy. So I'll land there, but that's kind of my perspective on it.
All right, Kay, we're almost out of time. I'm going to give you the last word and get your thoughts on the question at hand. This idea of speed, responsiveness. I'm sure there's a lot of transparency that goes into helping that out, but you also want to do your best to make sure when you look at that process that it's as streamlined as it can be. I know these are huge decisions. So much goes into them. There's certain elements that can't be rushed, and there's certain processes that have to be executed in order to come out in the right place, but you want it to be as tight as possible. What are your thoughts?
So I'll give credit to Rob Adamson, our corporate CIO, again, for the fourth aspect of how do you lead well in a large organization where the technology needs are intense, and that is be on the offense rather than the defense. And that black box of that's where things go to die is definitely defensive, not offensive. So how do you be offensive as an IT leader? Again, when the asks are there and the timeframes are short. And I feel like we're doing very well with that by basically sitting down, having as much face-to-face communication as possible in translating, just like the third time I'm using that word, translating the predicaments or the scenarios where and this happens all the time, I get the phone call, or I used to, I don't anymore. Kay, we just bought another practice. We just bought 17 docs are coming. We signed their contract and they're starting next Thursday. And the building where they've placed them has no network installed. They are not, obviously they're not on our EMR. They have all their patient records that need to be converted. I mean, you can't, no way, because that's not safe for the patient. We're not going to generate in revenue, and it's going to be a bad experience for everybody all around. So that's what I went in with. Let's take those things and let's talk about the results of doing something quickly and poorly. And what that means. And so those conversations must have happened, or still happening, but I've done them 500 times. And if that's what it takes to stay on the offensive and help things happen, at least, a little bit quicker, you got to have the conversations and you got to stay on the offense rather than the defense.
That's awesome. And I'm picturing that they expect you, when they give you that news about the practices they just bought, they're like, why aren't you excited? Why aren't you happy?
And they let my phrase went, and they let you get away with that? It doesn't work anymore.
Okay, I reflect on that, and I am sure our team would love a week's notice for that kind of change.
Oh,
We
yeah.
sometimes get calls day of from a provider saying, I started today. And then we have to react from that. So
100% happens all the time.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. That was an absolutely delightful, wonderful conversation regarding continuing education. You could use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording is ready for viewing. If you want to work with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team and go to our website to register for upcoming panels. With that, I want to thank this wonderful, tremendous, fun panel, Dr. Goel, Kay Marhefka, and Ross Stoddard. I want to thank Resourcing HQ for making the event possible and you for attending. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thank you.